Hey everyone, it's me, your best friend in the entire world, your worst enemy, um, your worst nightmare, your I don't know. I'm a lot of things to you and everyone I know. Thank you so much for watching Contrary to Henry, which is a show that I don't ever tell anyone when it's going to happen. You never know when it's coming because my life is so interesting and turbulent, and I have so much going on at all times that, and I have to promote what I'm doing. I have to talk about what I'm doing because no one else is. I mean, some people are. I'm really grateful that Helm Greycastle came out April 28th. Helm Greycastle #2 is coming out at the end of this month on the last Wednesday of every month, and I'm really excited for that on the 26th. And and this is something I'm going to talk about this with my guest, who I'm someone I adore, someone I think is universally loved in the comic book industry, which is very rare. Your friends are often like crapping on other friends you have, and you're like, oh, they're not cool, but they are cool to you once, and then but they weren't cool to that person. It's really difficult to have friends in the comic book industry. But this person I've never heard anything bad about, and maybe we'll find out if there is a bad thing. Maybe he's a bad boy, the bad boy of comics. Um, but yeah, so so I'm still packaging and shipping Kickstarter rewards, and I'm still like creating Helm Greycastle, which is like a blessing and honor, and it's really hard to do while you're doing a full-time job and doing your other part-time job, and we're gonna talk about all that with someone who like I said, I adore, and I'm really excited to have him on, and let's bring him in. Pornsak
Hey,
Pichetshote. Piece of shote.
hey,
Excuse me,
thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
dude.
Thank you for the intro. Would it be awesome right now if I just like trashed, like I just trashed
You were
after
drunk.
that great like intro? I'm just like, let me tell you about this guy.
Oh, it's so yes,
Thank you,
that would be
man.
great. I think we need a little bit more. I mean, I think we need more. Like not negativity, but more. I don't know. Like I think more like theater in comics.
You know what? I think if you got like a bunch of people who are like friends and actually did some like WWE like theatrics, like that would be sort of like there's
Right.
too much like actual negativity, I feel like, but like
Yes.
some like over the top WWE theatrics would be amazing.
Were you a fan of WWE or are you a fan?
I watched WWF back in the day just to show my age, but I
Same.
never got into. My problem is I don't know what it is for you, but like for me, like comics is a full time obsession. So
Oh
like
yeah.
if I get into anything else, it's just like between comics, TV, and movies and books, just like keeping. I'm not even on top of any of that, but just
Right.
the amount that like trying to stay somewhat relevant. Like I don't have time for
Yeah.
video games. I don't have
Right.
time for like
Same.
WWE, any of that.
Thank you, Robert, for watching. If you are watching, you can comment on Facebook. You can comment on YouTube. You can, I don't know about Twitter. It comes up as Periscope. Kayfabe for comics. Sell the drama. Yeah. No, we could do that. I think we could do something like that. So if you have any questions for Pornsak or myself, but please more questions for Pornsak. Congratulations. The Good Asian came out last Wednesday. And here's
Yes.
something I want to talk about. Isn't it funny how like the Wednesday your book comes out and like literally the day, if not the night, it's like it never came out?
You've got to get used to modulating your you got to get used to modulating your
Right.
expectations. You got to get used
Seriously.
to modulating your expectation. It's all about right. But then next month you got to go through it all over again. So there you go.
Yeah, but it's with even less enthusiasm somehow.
Right? Yeah, yeah,
Because like a number one, everyone's excited
yeah.
for. Number two, it's like, it's like, oh yeah,
That's the terror. The number two terror is the terror of like,
right.
especially nowadays with the way things are. You don't know what numbers are real and what numbers aren't. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's like everyone's got all these covers and you're doing all this and all that, and
You had a
so
lot of
like
covers. I mean, let's talk.
we
I guess
both
we
had a
should.
lot of covers, my
Yeah,
friend.
I mean,
I'm pretty impressed by your covers.
thank you. I was like, I, I like this, I like to think of it as like maybe it's the last time I'll ever get to do this, you know? So like Lapham,
I feel the same way.
Clunan,
I feel the same way.
Parker, like those three were like, those are people I've admired my whole life,
Yeah.
people I've always wanted to work with. And if they had, like, back when I was like not a professional in comics, but like a very big consumer, I was like, if Clunan, Lapham, Parker have their name on it, I want it in my pool.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted, was like, these are the books that I would buy anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, the way I look at it, the way sort of my approach to comics is that it's a place for me, it's an excuse for me to keep in touch with my old friends, and it's a place for me to make new friends. And so like I try really hard, you know, to kind of keep that going, just because like, and especially for covers, right? Because covers is a great chance of like, get someone you've been a fan of, get someone that you've known for years, and just like, one of these days we'll do something together. And everyone's too busy, but like they can usually, hopefully, do it. Some of them can. Some of them are too busy for even that. But like they can do a cover at the very least, and then you get to share something with them. So like so that's one of the things I find about variant covers. It's a chance to like you know, in this particular book, most of the variant covers, I set a rule for myself for our variants. They're Asian creators that I've never worked with before.
Wow.
You know, because there's so many good ones out there. So some of them are friends that I've known for a while. Like, you know, one of our upcoming covers is by Dustin Nguyen, who's like one of the best in the business. And me and Dustin will always be at a show. You know, we'll always catch up. He's always like mobbed by people. I'll try to like squeeze in, like, and we'll talk for like 5 minutes, usually at the end of the show. We'll always talk about like, you know, whenever we're in each other's neighborhood, we have to hang out, and we never do because we're never like, it never happens. But so to get a chance, like finally I get to work with Dustin. Like that's so cool. I'm so excited, you know, or just someone like I'm just a fan of. I'm going to reach out on email. They're probably too busy, but maybe they can do it. Or the fun thing now, because this wasn't the case when I was an editor, is like you just find someone on Instagram and like they're awesome. I'm going to take this shot in the dark and reach out to someone I don't even know on Instagram and see if they're interested. Like, so it's so much fun.
It gets easier when you say this is for Image Comics, like that. You can see the ears perk up. You know what I mean?
Hopefully. Some people like still.
No, you know what's funny?
Some people that's like
You know what's funny? Somebody told me, "Oh well, Image is an indie," and I'm like, "Bro, I paid for this issue."
Yeah, right, right.
If this isn't indie, then I don't know what is.
Totally.
Like I've had the privilege. I know Will Dennis, your editor. Someone I go way back with from San Diego Comic-Con and hanging out with him once a year, and yourself once a year, because I remember you weren't a California native until DC moved out here, or
2011 is when I moved out.
So let's talk about The Good Asian, which is like, I'm a huge noir fan. Like, I don't know if the Lapham name drop is enough to let you know that, you know, I'm a huge Stray Bullets fan in film. I love noir. And then I want to talk about what this book is about, but I also want to talk about something that I think only you and I can talk about, that what I've gathered from the book.
Okay, cool. But yeah, first of all, I can't ever do one of these things without mentioning, because you mentioned Lapham, like, anytime anyone asks me, what's your favorite book? Like, or what are you reading that you like? It's always Stray Bullets. It's all like, Stray Bullets is always everyone's favorite book. Like it's just, I love that book so much. I think Lapham is such a genius.
He is.
And 100 Bullets. Don't get me wrong. 100 Bullets is like 100 Bullets, Brubaker, like they're all my favorite. But like in terms of books that are still coming out, like it is amazing to me that every issue Lapham, like it's like he pulls off this magic trick. Every issue. Like other people, they'll stop and they'll do new things, but like he's telling not the same story, but like in this universe, and every month it's kind of like this magic trick that he's like pulls off. I'm just blown away by it.
It is incredible, and I think we could do a Stray Bullets podcast. Today we're gonna Good Asian.
Right. Thank you.
I have to stop myself, because I will talk about Stray Bullets until I'm blue in the face.
but yeah, no, but The Good Asian, thank you for saving me from myself. But The Good Asian is sorry, my face got very big all of a sudden. And it threw me.
You're in
But
solo view. This is everyone's focused on you right now.
oh
I'm
wow,
still
I
here.
appreciate that. The Good Asian is a genre we're calling Chinatown Noir. It's a 1936 detective story featuring the first generation of Americans that grew up underneath an immigration ban, the Chinese. So it follows a self-loathing, troubled Chinese American detective named Edison Hark as he goes through 1936 Chinatown, which he's been for the first time, and he's searching for a missing girl, and in classic noir fashion, it leads to a murder and a conspiracy, and it really forces him to kind of deal with his own sort of self-identity and his relationship to his community and his relationship to his family, and hopefully it does all those classic noir stuff under this new lens. And really what I try to do is I tried it to you know use the genre to talk about, to explore all these Asian American ideas and themes that I don't feel like I see enough in
Right.
entertainment in general. So yeah, so that's what the book is.
Yeah, no. What I love about this series is, I mean, what I'm going through with Helm Greycastle is having it become like you are doing something that's a period piece and
Mm-hmm.
having it look very authentic. And I wanted to talk about how difficult was that for you? Because it's not easy for you to do
Yeah.
something that looks good and looks believable, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for showing all that stuff. It's it's a ton of work. It's a metric ton of work. I had the idea for this book before my last book, Infidel, which came out in 2018. Before that book came out, and so I knew I wanted to work in this sort of space for a while, and it was a lot of steady research. And for me, if you're looking at Chinese Americans in San Francisco Chinatown in the 1930s and sort of what the shadow of the Chinese Exclusion Act, and I should say too that one of the big things this is about that factors into the story for people who don't know is that between 1882 to 1943, there was a ban on all Chinese immigrants coming into America. It was the Chinese Exclusion Act, and then in 1924, the Immigration Act of 1924 banned all Asians and Arabs from coming into America. And so, if you're doing research, there's not a lot of stuff that is going to that speaks exactly to that. And so what I had to do personally is I had to triangulate things from a bunch of different sources. I would read stuff about what, the Chinese experience was like during that time. I would read about, immigration at the time. I would read about period pieces. I would read noir stuff. And then after that kind of overlapped them to kind of sort of composite a picture. So, it took a while to feel comfortable and confident. And honestly, a big part of that too is, I have a historical consultant on the book, Grant Din, and he's kind of my last line of defense where like I've done all this research and, kind of put together what I thought, and he'll kind of come in and be like, well, you want watch out about that. Like, I don't know about that and all that. And we kind of sort of work from there.
Interesting. I did a book called La Voz de Mayo.
Yeah.
And that
Great
took,
book.
thank you, 3 years to do. And I was very particular about like how it looked, didn't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
Didn't want to make it look like I didn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
So what was your research like? Were you going to libraries? Were you going to San Francisco?
Yeah. I mean, all of the above. Libraries, yeah. I now, on my desk, there's a permanent stack of books that, has to do with that. A lot of blogs. Went to San Francisco, went to Angel Island, went to the historical
What's
Chinese
Angel
Society.
Island? Forgive my ignorance.
No. Yeah. So Angel Island is if you came in over the Atlantic, I think everyone's familiar with Ellis Island, which is the immigration station, which everyone kind of passed in through. Angel Island and Ellis, coming through Ellis Island wasn't always an easy procedure. It definitely had its challenges, and it was definitely rough for the travelers. Angel Island, coming over the Pacific, was tough. Was even tougher. because primarily by 1936, a ban on on Asian immigrants, they would screen the Chinese sort of coming in to make sure that that they were in fact who they said they were, and therefore could be allowed into the country. And so what you would find is these questionnaires would be over 100 questions long, and people could and immigrants could stay there from anywhere from 2 days to 2 years in the process of these interviews that would be given. And they would be, and I try to give the flavor of that in the book. It would be, they would be questions like, how many windows do you have? How many windows does this room have? How far away do you do your shopping? How many steps is it to do your shopping? And they were constantly there to try to, I mean, sometimes as far as trip up sort of Chinese immigrants, to make sure that if anyone was lying, they wouldn't get into the country.
Yeah, that is, I didn't go to college. I don't know about you.
I went to college. I don't remember a lot of it, but I know I was there.
I think you and I have a shared experience in digging into something that you didn't get to learn about in school.
Yeah, definitely.
And I, learned a lot about my own neighborhood that I grew up in. It was a small Indian reservation called Old Pascua, and learning about the significance of the people that they had in the infrastructure of the city of Tucson, and then learning about the people itself, and then learning about how far they went. And that's when I learned about Mesoamerican history, and to see that the Yaquis actually were documented during the Spanish conquest. And you're like, did you ever feel like you were like going down a rabbit hole and you needed to like stop?
Definitely. I think that's I don't know. I'd be curious what your process is like, but I feel like, there definitely comes a point where research can be procrastination if you're not careful, and I'm sure I fell into that hole a couple times in this project. I mean, I don't know if you felt the same way when you're working on your stuff.
It took 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, at a certain point, I was like, more questions, more answers, not enough answers. And then I was like, realizing, I'm writing about something that's never been like published before in a way that I want to do it. So I'm never going to find this particular answer, and I can't go back in time. And
so, I mean, it was kind of that for me. Like, I poured myself over the research, and I think honestly, like, that's why if Grant was here, if Grant was working on the book, if I never found Grant, like, that was my backstop. That kind of gave me the confidence to be kind of like, okay, I can do this. Because there's a world where I didn't find him. I don't know, like, it could have taken, like, because like, I'm a big believer that, that if you're going to author something, you need authority. But it takes a while to talk about something with authority. Like, it takes a certain amount of research to feel comfortable that you're an authority on the matter. And at the same time, like, how can you author something without it? So, like, I can do all the research, but I think there's still those questions in the air. It's like, but does 1 + 1 really equal 2? Does it goes there? Does all that sort of stuff?
Right.
And so to be able to have someone like Grant on board, be like, no, you're right about this. Like, ooh, you might be careful about that. Oh, I think you misinterpreted this. Like, that was really good. And I think too, like, and I think, I mean, I'm speaking for him, but like, I think Grant had kind of expected, that's not true, but like I'm sure Grant who knows what Grant had thought of me sort of coming in here. I know there's a version where maybe he had thought like, I hadn't done my research and I'm going just to do that, but so we have a nice working relationship, because like, I quickly made it clear that like, all this research means a lot to me, and I want him there to support that. I don't want him there to like do like wave a photograph, a Photoshop filter, and like make it accurate now and all that kind
of stuff. Talk about Grant and your team. Who's behind The Good Asian?
I love everybody on my team, honestly. Alexander Tefengi is the artist. He's got this amazing story where he's from African descent. He lives in France now. he's born in Africa of Vietnamese descent, lives in France now, but and he's talked about this in other podcasts, so I can talk about this, you know, but he found out sort of like late in life that he was adopted, and his biological father was Asian, and so he didn't know he was Asian before that. And so when I met him, you know, it was after he was living in Vietnam for 3 years, because he had found out his you know, his father, you know, that he was Vietnamese, and so he moved his whole family to Vietnam to kind of like to get back in touch with his, you know, to learn that aspect of himself. And one of the really amazing things was, like, you know, me and Will, we were looking for an artist for this book, and it was one of those like wonderful problems to have, where he had trouble finding someone, because I really wanted an Asian artist, just so that they're, you know, just so that little subtleties would sort of make it through, that like there's things that I could never put into a script, and they just get. And one of the things that I was sort of happy to find was that, like, oh, they're all working. Like, all the ones I was looking at were all working. And so it was actually kind of tough to like find somebody. And in that time, Alex, who had worked on a book for Skybound called Outpost Zero, he was finishing up that work, and he met Cliff, or he got reacquainted with Cliff. He had known Cliff already. They were hanging out at a Skybound party, and he was just telling him about his life. And it's like, yeah, I'm at this thing now, and I'm in Vietnam, and I'm like getting in touch with my Asian roots, and what does that even mean? And Cliff was like, you got to talk to Pornsak. Like, you and Pornsak need to talk to each other. And so it was just like, and so we're both kind of like, oh my God. It was like, you know,
wow,
like the hand of God kind of like bringing Alex to us to work on this book. And his art is just amazing. And, you know, it's clean, it's emotive. He's this wonderful draftsman. The thing that he does that kind of blows my mind is that, you know, I've worked on my last book. I worked with Aaron Campbell, who's amazing.
I saw him at Thought Bubble.
Yeah, he is amazing. But he's a guy that uses like photo refs. It starts with photo refs and kind of works from there, and sort of works sort of his process and all that. And Alex isn't one of those guys. And with a guy like Aaron, I can understand, if you're starting from photo ref, how you can get like all these nuanced expressions that Aaron can kind of get, you know. But Alex is one of those guys where he doesn't use reference, and it's great for a noir. His characters are able to express two emotions at once, so you can really see the conflict in the characters. And it's something that just like blows me away, that like he just conjures that up out of his mind, and then he can just like, you know, do that. It's one of the things that makes him like so great. I'm so grateful. And like, we've become really good friends. We talk, you know, every other week. He just had 3 months ago, he just had his second child, so it's a little less now. Yeah. No, he's been doing all this. Like, his second kid was born a week before the book was announced.
Oh my god.
So like, his life is just like, you know how crazy this is, like running this like sideshow carnival that we have. But like, he's got like a new kid on top of that. So I have no idea how he does it. And he's still drawing the book. Like, he's amazing. Yeah.
Sorry, kid.
He's amazing.
This comic is going to be around a lot longer than you.
As long as any of us are. But Alex is amazing. And then Lee Lowridge, who is like Lee's amazing.
One of the best colorists of all time.
One of the best colorists. Not only that, the other greatest colorists in the industry, he's trained like half of them. So like Matt Wilson and Nick Filardi and like all these guys, like, you know, he's trained them all. But again, going back to like making new friends and working with having an excuse to talk to my old ones, like Lee was the very first freelancer I went and got drinks with. He was like,
really?
I was like, yeah. Like, I think I was like a month into my job.
Did you go to a car garage and drink an old Porsche?
I mean, he didn't have quite the bougie life. That kind of bougie. That's a new thing for Lee. When I met him, he was still in Savannah. I think it was before his Porsches and any of that kind of stuff. Because we just went to like a dive bar in the corner, and
well, but even at this point of any point of his life, I'm sure he'll go to a dive bar. Last time I got to hang out with him was from your Infidel secret headquarters party.
Right, that's right. Oh my god,
that was a great time.
The thing I loved about that party too is that
the doubt from the shop that they didn't think it was
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
be
yeah,
like a college party and Seth Rogen was
right.
going to drive his car into the front window.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, all the
Any
parties I
comic
throw are
shop
kind of
signing,
college parties.
yeah,
Yeah,
like any comic shop signing is a hit or miss, but that
yeah, yeah,
one was like like a legit Hollywood party.
yeah. Well. I mean, I don't know Hollywood party, but it was a legit party,
Yeah.
and that was the one thing about that. It's like, listen, I don't know if anyone's gonna show up who wants a signature for my book, but there's one thing I know how to do is throw a party. So it's all I need is the venue, because like I moved to LA and like I have a 1 bedroom apartment now. It's like I'm not putting people in like, no, I'm not
Yeah.
doing that. But like give me an excuse to throw a party and I'm like, all right, I'm in. This
What
is
side of
something I
town
know
are
how to
you
do.
in? I'm in
I'm in
North
Los
Hollywood.
I'm in Los Feliz.
Dude, I ride by your neighborhood at least once a week.
Weren't you around Los Feliz at some point? Like I feel
No,
like we used to be like,
I was off of Cahuenga in the Hollywood Hills near the
oh, okay,
reservoir for
got it.
for almost 2 years. I was paying like too much money for a place I was never in
Right,
because I was traveling for cons like twice a
oh God,
month.
that's right. Yeah,
It was really
yeah.
depressing because it was the
I
nicest apartment I've ever had.
Oh my God. Yeah. Sadly, my 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 quarantine life and my regular life isn't as different as it should be. You
Hmm.
know, like
Yeah,
I still
same.
spend
I
like
think that's the everyone in comics can attest to that.
yeah, yeah. So I'm
Like,
just in there. I'm in there a lot. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this whole like reading things as they're popping up
oh
as I'm
yeah,
talking to you.
everyone's
So this
saying
is new for
nice
me.
things. Don't worry.
Oh, okay, good to know. Good to know. Uh,
There's and it
I
looks like yeah, I guess there's a is there going to I mean, I think we're like a lot of these books, especially mine, ride and die on whether people buy it or not.
Yeah, yeah. So
So,
I exactly. It's the same thing as yours, where you know the will is there. It's really if people show up and it merits it. We
and
definitely
it's
want.
not
We
like
definitely want them.
yeah, we're not telling people you have to support this with every dollar or anything, but that's just the reality.
Yeah. But listen, if you want to support it with every dollar, like we're not
Yeah.
gonna stop
We're
you
not gonna
either.
say no.
Yeah. If you want to mortgage your house and just buy a bunch of copies, like don't let us stop you.
You'll get your own variant cover.
Right. There you go. Yeah. But like Lee is like such a good friend, so it was awesome to have him on this. And
Oh,
he
I
is
love
like
Lee.
Lee's so good. Like Lee's like such a good guy, and it's just like it. And again, it was like it's so great. And we put his name on a list of like people for Alex to look at, and Alex like instantly like him. He's the guy. And then I was just like, that's so great because like I got an excuse to call Lee Lowridge. I got an excuse to call Lee. So like great, you know. And then Jeff Powell is our letterer designer,
Oh,
and
the lettering in that
uh,
book is amazing.
he's good. Like, and his design work is so fantastic too. And like, especially like, I'm coming off this thing now because like I'm just realizing I'm old, and so like,
You don't
when
look
I
old.
see Zoom and these headphones help a lot. Let me just tell you that. Zoom. Oh, now you make me look big. Damn it. but Zoom and these. But like
Hey, you
my
got the
thing
salt
now.
pepper look, baby. That just,
Yeah,
come on.
I'm trying to distract people as much as I can from it.
Yeah.
But now I get like when comics the lettering is too small and it reminds me it's like, oh, 5 years ago you could read this no problem, and now you're like squinting and like
Oh, that's
you
funny.
know. And so like now I
Mhm.
just like resent books. I'm like, you're reminding me I'm old. But it's something like I know Jeff goes through the same thing, and so like the way he does his lettering is so, I don't know. There's just some like, not only is it like clean and very legible, but just it feels like tactile almost, And I
Right.
just love his lettering for that. And he's got like this great design sense too. So like, I mean, we work together on Infidel, and like, we just, I love having him. I love continuing to work with him here. Will Dennis is one of my best friends in comics,
Oh,
honestly. Like Will's like, Will was one of my mentors. Him and Karen Berger was one of my two mentors when I was working at Vertigo. So again, the excuse to like get emails from Will and to email Will and to hop on the phone with Will, like I miss that. Like, that's
yeah.
like, I don't know about you, but like, that's what I miss about working comics. It's like the people and nowadays we're at this point in our lives where you need work as an excuse to talk to your friends, unfortunately, and that's kind of I will say that the pandemic has made that a little bit better, which now people are just like, no, I don't want it to just be work is the reason
Right.
why I talk to people. Like, let's actually talk because we can't leave our houses and all that.
Right.
So, but that Dave Johnson, like one of the best cover artists sort of in the business,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
his 100 Bullets covers are the bar for me in terms of like what a comic book cover should do, and so the fact that like he's on board and again I get to like joke around with Dave again, like that's great. So I mean, so yes, I love everybody I work with, and again it's all the reasons why I love comics. It's a chance to work with my friends, but also an opportunity to make new friends, and
Right.
so yeah, so that's
That's beautiful. I mean, I think it's rare in the comic book industry where you get to leave and do like film and television, like Cloak and Dagger. Congratulations. That
thank you,
must have
thank
been
you.
such a rewarding experience.
It was a really great people. I mean, that was another one where the showrunner was awesome. Everyone was like a great like person, not just really talented, but a great person. I learned from everybody. So like I was just really happy, and I'm really like proud of that show. I was like heartbroken when it didn't get a third season. But yeah, no, I just loved. It was a great experience.
Hey,
Hey,
John
John.
John is an inspiration
Hey,
to why I do this. I mean, I
John's awesome.
I love his show. It's been
Yeah,
15 years. It's going on for 15 years. If you're watching this, you got to watch and listen to
yeah,
Word Balloon. And I always tell people that I didn't go to college. I worked at a call center and listened to Word Balloon and
that's
just
awesome.
learned about the history and the industry. And I feel like, one of the things I will talk to you about that I will confess is something I haven't learned in comics is how to get someone else to pay for the stories I want to tell.
Yeah,
But
yeah, don't.
but I've learned that it's really important to maintain your intellectual property,
Yeah,
maintain the people that you're working with, make sure they're being taken care of, and learning from like all the mistakes other creators
yeah,
have had and made is from listening to them because of the platform it gives them. I
yeah,
just want to
definitely.
acknowledge Isaac Goodhart. That's so funny. I always put that wow, I'm impressed in all his posts and everything he puts on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I love that guy. And he's doing stuff at DC, started off with a Top Cow Talent
Yeah,
Hunt winner. So
that's awesome. Good for him.
yeah, no. So like I want to talk about The Good Asian before
Okay.
we, talk about something else.
Okay.
While I was reading the book, there's a scene where the cop gets called out for like, hey, you're like turning your own in. Like
Mm,
there's that, I mean, growing up on the border, a lot of Mexicans become cops and a
yeah.
lot of Mexicans become, or, people of south of the border become border patrol.
Yeah.
There is this like self-hatred that you have because you're kind of uh, inspired. Everything around you is like it really degrades who you are. Like being Mexican is like being poor, so you want to emulate being white.
Right.
So I saw that interaction in the comic interesting and was wondering like what was the inspiration behind that.
I mean, I think for everything that Edison and Hart goes through in the comic, and it really was a chance for me to take personal things that I went through, and that I hope anyway that other Asian Americans sort of will recognize it, and just taking all that and doing what I think good genre does, which is taking that and heightening it and dramatizing on these higher sort of stakes. So this idea that the thing, I feel sort of as an Asian American, but I also feel this is true just by like immigrant American, just in general, is that you feel that you're straddling these two cultures, these two worlds. And part of that is trying to figure out like who you are amidst all that. And especially, and again, I don't think it's exclusively Asian American, but with my particular background in Asian America, I think that like you've got Eastern culture and Western culture, and a lot of times they seem in conflict with one another. Western culture is very individualistic. Eastern culture is very community oriented. And so a lot of that just that conflict comes from how much do I want to take from column A and how much do I want to take from column B, and am I betraying one by choosing one over the other? So a lot of like what Hark is going through as a cop, choosing sort of between communities like that, is an extrapolation of just like me growing up and my parents telling me, hey, you need to take a job in engineering because that's going to that's going to help your family, and and you'll be able to raise you'll be able to take care of us when we're older, and into all of that. And I'm just like, well, I want to work in the arts where it's a lot less guaranteed, but is that a betrayal? Because by those standards, by that culture and that way of thinking, it could be. So a lot of it takes that and sort of heightens it and explores it. But I think too, but because it explores it sort of on, in still a real world like canvas, then I think we get into, what is it to be an Asian American cop? And like, listen, this book is about in 1936 and my research is for that period. So I can't talk with authority about, what it's like, now, but I do think, at least for Hark, and I do think that there is a DNA that stands here now, that I do think our community's relationship with the police has to do with our relationship with whiteness, and it has to do with how a white society gives value to communities of color. And for a long time anyway, and I think the big conversation now is how much of this will change, and how to what degree this will change and how much this will change, is the degree of as communities of colors try to redefine that playing field and say like, how can we define so that there is value that's independent of whiteness? And I think Hark being a cop, that's part of that conversation.
I agree. And something that I like to talk about with La Voz de Mayo in particular is it opens with a scene where I take my great grandfather in like 2015 to a march on Cesar Chavez Day, who's someone he knew. And it was in support of a woman that was that had sought asylum for 400 days to avoid deportation. If you read that now, it's an evergreen tweet. Like it's always going to be topical. It's always going to be something that we're going to be talking about for the rest of our lives. I feel like it's serendipitous that like The Good Asian's coming out and Made in Korea is coming out like around the same time. These problems that we're seeing in the Asian American community have just been heightened in the last 4 years, but have been a problem before that. So like, do you feel like The Good Asian will like is kind of speaks to that, where it's gonna like it does seem like topical and relevant now, but do you think it's going to be something that we're going to always be talking about?
I mean, okay, so will the book be something we'll always be talking about? Like, I don't know. But like, are these topics
the topics in your book?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I hope so, in the sense that I don't think they're going to magically go away. And I think the fear for any marginalized community is that when there is a discussion about the things that are happening with your community, is it a blip and it lasts a second and then it's gone, or is it a seed for change? Will something positive come from this? And I think we're all the question. The answer is I don't know. Like the answer is we hope so. We hope that the conversation is no longer relevant. But I think if history has proven anything, it's that these conversation the relevancy of these conversations never really go away. Unfortunately, it's part of the DNA of this country and who we are. And I think hopefully, the lessons that we're learning moving forward is the fact that maybe we can't expect them to go away, but maybe part of the the experiment that is America is constantly having these discussions and constantly, moving the ball forward and back and forward and the back in the hopes of finding something that involves equity for everybody.
That's exactly what I was trying to get to. Thank you.
No.
So The Good Asian's an interesting title. Have you was that the first title you came up with, or?
Titles take a while for me to sort of, every single project I have starts as untitled thing.
Really?
Untitled something project. Yeah,
I mean, Infidel is like a perfect title. That's a perfect horror book. It's such a amazing book. And I'm also like surprised with how far between these books are. Like, you were on NPR, like top 100 books of all time or something like that. The Infidel landed on some list, right? And then like 3 years later, this book comes out. Was the pandemic a reason why we had a pause, or because that's what happened to Helm?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic is partly, definitely the goal was to get it out in 2020. The pandemic pushed that back, and also like, thank God it did in a certain sense, because like I wouldn't want to put a book, try to get people to buy a book amidst all the craziness that was happening last year. I mean, I'm just now getting used to the idea of getting them to buy a book now, and when things are, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But honestly, a lot of it for me was, I knew this was going to be my next book. I had a very weird thing happen where I started off as a editor at DC Vertigo. Then after that, I moved out here and became a think tank. Became part of a think tank to turn DC Comics into translate them into other media, and that would lead me to sort of like lead up the TV division over there. And then I left that job to kind of pursue writing, and then a whole lot of nothing happened. Like, just like not like tumbleweeds. And so then it was just like trying to like get stuff out and get going. And what ended up happening for me is that, because I've always loved TV and comics, and I was looking for work for both, that they both happened at like the exact same time. And so like I got I want to say the first issue of Infidel came out, and like the next month I got the Cloak and Dagger job, or something like they came at the exact same time.
How funny is you leave a DC job to get a Marvel TV job?
I know, right? if there's one thing I've learned, if there's one thing I've learned, and I don't know if this is helpful or reassuring to people, but it's usually strangers who give you your first big break. It's your friends will come in, and I get it. Like, your friends will come in after you've established yourself a little bit, because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want you to give you your first big break and be like, oh no, it's because we're friends that, and like, now I've got to fire my friend or anything like that. And so one of the things I found in sort of my life, it's that it's actually your perfect strangers who don't know you, who end up giving you your first big break, and which is great, because you can say that you got it the old fashioned
on your own merit. Yeah. I always say it's all about who you know.
Yeah, but this town is one of those weird things where it's like partly who you know. It's, people who you know will help you with those perfect strangers, because it's all like very, very small. Right. So definitely. But because of that, I had these, I got my first staffing job on TV right when Infidel came out, and then it was just like, how do I balance these two things sort of at once? And the answer I found was very badly. And so the TV jobs came, and I would take the TV job, but then it meant like I had to postpone the comics a little bit. And so my life right now is just constantly trying to spin these two plates and hope neither of them sort of crash on the floor. But that's the reason why it was a while. It took 2 years, because a bunch of TV jobs came up, and I hadn't figured out yet how to sort of like write comics and do it at the same time. And one of the things I found out had to happen was that I had to write comics when I wasn't working on TV, and I had to be ahead of my artist, which again also added to that delay between books.
Definitely. 2 Cents Horror Stories, does that ring a bell?
Yeah. That was Cloak and Dagger was my first TV job, but 2 Cents Horror Stories was actually my very first job as a professional writer, where at the time I was hired on the first season, and at that point it was going to be a web series for like shorts for Verizon Go 90. And then, because television is crazy, After I wrote it, like a year and a half later, it went to the CW, expanded into half hour when I kind of went back in and rewrote sort of my episode for that. But it's a weird thing of, it's technically the first thing I was hired for, but it was actually like one of the last things to air. So my first actual TV credit is Cloak and Dagger.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, like I'm coming to a point in this comic book industry where I need to pivot into film and television because that's where I'm going to make more money. And, you know, I think maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully you can prove me wrong. But
no, I think, listen, I think for anybody, right? Like you got to diversify your portfolio. You got to, like, diversity is key, and not putting all your eggs in one basket. Like I think across the board, that's especially like now where there's so many different media and there's like, you know, all these forums to sort of do stuff. The idea, and it's definitely something like I've had to train myself to constantly, like, you know, I'm old fashioned. And so, like, you know, this is new for me. And so, like, but this idea, this is very new for me. And so, just you know, you constantly have to, like, train yourself to, like, think in, like, you know, different media and all that kind of stuff. And
definitely.
I think for everybody, the idea of just living in one medium, one, I don't think it's a thing anymore. And two, it doesn't have to be a thing because the barriers between the two are more porous than they've ever been.
Right. Looks like we have a question.
Okay.
Do you have a pipeline for your stories? If X doesn't become a comic, then maybe a screenplay. So, I mean, I'll answer that question first.
Yeah. I'd love to hear what you're...
Helm Greycastle and La Voz de Mayo are comic books, 100%. They weren't meant to be anything else. Like, and my response to what you're saying now is one of the, like, things that's difficult for me to hear. It's like comic books, and I'm sure you can relate. It's a hard industry to get into.
Yeah.
And it's hard to stay in. And when you're like me and have, like, I was lucky to have been in journalism. I flirted with stand-up comedy. But writing was always the component in all those things. But the comic book industry, there's very few jobs. How I got my job, I didn't have to, like, manually apply anywhere. I didn't have to do a drug test like all my other jobs. Not to say that, like, everyone's high in comics, but it's just not as important for you to be, like, you know, clean, which is a horrible thing. But anyway, but, like, for me, it's like when I write Helm Greycastle, it is for the page. It is for an artist to, like, work on. It is for lettering is very specific. Coloring is very specific. Panel layouts, page turns. Like, for me, I'm really writing for this medium in every conceivable possibility. And, like, even with the comic, this isn't Helm Greycastle, I'm just pulling a random comic, but if you open issues 1 and 2, the inside front cover and back cover are actual maps, so you can place your miniatures on there. So I'm encouraging people to take the artifact and rip the interior pages out and use it as a map.
That's awesome.
So, like, I'm even trying to break the fourth wall in a way where people have to, like, tear it apart.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
I hate, like, perfect mint comics. Like, I love that people enjoy their CGC slab stuff. Like, do it, spend all the money. Like, do that, but I could never do that to my books.
Yeah. No, this idea that, like, to have a book that I can't read, like, that's so crazy.
Like, look at all the books next to your head right there.
I know. The idea that I can't, like, to put them in, like, plastic that I can't read them, like, I couldn't do it. And I think for me, like, I love comics, and so, like, I definitely want to. I know I had that same question. Like, I had the same question that Kaylee is. Like, wait a minute, there's Henry has stand-up out there that I haven't seen. I need to find this.
Discovered I'm canceled, so just don't even go. It's over. This was 90s.
Okay.
Stand-up. Anyway, so yeah, like, what about you? So is this like is Good Asian? Was that supposed to be a screenplay? But then
it's all comics for me. Like, I'm thinking very much about the page, and, like, for me too, like, it's also like the Good Asian for me takes all this inspiration from, like, you know, Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and Lou Archer, mysteries, and Easy Rollins mysteries. And I want you to feel the same experience reading this comic as you do reading those books, And so for me, part of the fun is, all right, how do I take that experience and translate it into a page of comics? How do I use the grammar of comics and 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 give you that same feeling? It's a little less intellectual when you looked at my last book, like Infidel. Infidel was like, all right, how do you get all the feels of a horror movie and do that on a comics page? And that was like the fun of writing it for me. Like, how do I use comics language to do that? And same for The Good Agent. It's how to use comics language to get the same feel that I get when I'm reading an old Chandler novel, because when you're reading those old books, you find out very quickly, it's like, oh, prose is the best medium for these stories. Like, it's all about, people seeing things and people talking to people, and that's it.
Right.
And so part of doing a comics, like, all right, well, how do I take that and make that a visual experience that feels good on a page? And that's part of the challenge, but it's part of the fun. It's the reason to do it. And now after that, because as someone who likes to write television as well, I'll take like a step back and sort of say, all right, that's the comic. Is there a version where I take the spirit of the comic, and can I do it in another medium? Can I do it in film or TV and all that kind of stuff? And that's like also a fun challenge. But when I'm writing a comic, I'm writing a comic, and I love writing a comic. Like, I need to know where all my page turns are. It's one of the reasons why, like, I haven't written a book for like Marvel and DC where there are ads inserted in there, and like the idea that like I don't know if a page is a right-hand page or a left-hand page, like that's crazy to me. Like
I picked up a Marvel book and I was reading it and I was like, I'm only looking this way, and then I realized every right page was an ad.
Oh wow,
I was
really?
like, oh wow, like I didn't even think of it. It was just one of those things where I think, it's not a knock on Marvel and DC.
Yeah,
It's
no, not at all.
It's definitely like I feel like you probably feel really lucky that you get to use all the real estate.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like, and it's one of those things. Like, listen, if someone gave me the option of just like, hey, it'll be that much easier to put out this book, you've just got to allot these number of pages to like for ads, like I'll take that.
Oh, totally.
If sponsorship, I'll totally take that.
But I was thinking about going to hemp shops and like weed shops around LA and like seeing if they'll pay for page, like 20,000 copies will be sold, and a lot of it's in California. So like
that's interesting.
I don't know. I think it'd have to be a more weed centric comic.
Yeah, it probably would, but that's still really interesting though.
Yeah.
But like I don't have that luxury. So, but like, but I can turn that bug into a feature where for me, and you do it in your book too, where it's just like, all right, if that's the case though, I want this whole experience. Like I want from the second you open that book to the second you close that back cover, I want it to be an entire experience where you're just in this world, And so that's why you've got the story, you've got the back matter, you've got like the design pages, all that. And it's all to kind of give, because like, you can tell from the books of my child, like I can fetishize books. I like holding books in my hands, and I want to write and create comics for people who fetishize their books in that sense, who love that aspect of like where no page is wasted and no page doesn't feed into the experience of that story.
I agree. No, I'm the same way. I'm really, I do want to give every kind of reader their due. We have a lot of people watching, so let's just recap who you are.
Okay.
And what The Good Agent is about, and when number 2 is coming out.
Yes. Okay. So I am Pornsak Pichetshote. I write The Good Asian. The Good Asian is a genre we're calling Chinatown Noir, about a 1936 detective story that featuring the first generation of Americans to grow up underneath an immigration ban, the Chinese. FOC, for people who are down with that lingo, FOC for the issue 2 is Monday, which means I believe the book is out June 7th is when the second issue is out. Hopefully the first issue, which just came out last week, is at a comic book store near you.
Isn't it wild how like you're like, hey everyone, I need you to buy 1 and 2 at the same time.
Right.
Like, you haven't read this book and you don't know if it's good or not, but I need you to also buy 2. And if you can, 3.
Comics are so weird in that sense too, where it's also, hey everyone, I need you to buy this book in 3 weeks. You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's not
because
coming out until 3 months from now.
right. But if you don't commit to it now, you won't get it. So hey guys, remember, and also too, like, I'm not going to give you a link on where to buy it. I'm going to give you a link on where you can find where you can find a place that might sell it.
And both of us are in Los Angeles, and we both have a very supportive retailer, Ed, who runs
Yes.
Collector's Paradise.
He's
So if
fantastic.
you go to Cards and Collectibles, if you Google Collector's Paradise, Good Asian Signature Series, they will get 6 issues signed by you.
They'll get 9 issues signed.
It's 9 issues.
9 issues. It's 9
Are
issues.
you doing 9 and then a trade?
I at the latest notice we'll be doing 2 trades.
Wow. So
yeah.
How many issues will be in volume 1?
4.
So 4 and then 2 is 5?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a odd number.
Yeah, I know.
We did throw off FOC, which means final order cutoff for people.
Right. Yes.
So we're gonna get an insider baseball here, which is my favorite thing to do in comics. Why do 4 issues and then 5 for 2? Why not just do all of it together?
I think honestly for us was trying to, and by the way, I should preface this first by saying
you can also deny. You don't have to talk about it. You can say, Henry, screw you. It's none of your fucking business.
Well, I should say I do want to sort of be accurate that it is a conversation that we're having right now. That part of the conversation is because the original plan was to do a trade with all of it, and one of the conversations we're having now is that do we want to do a trade sooner while these topics are so relevant in sort of the culture right now. And one of the, we still haven't made a firm decision yet in terms of which way we should go with all that.
If I have a vote in this, which I don't, I'm
Yeah.
saying do 1.
I mean, there's a good, like I said, we're having the discussion back and forth. We're having the discussion back and forth.
Because volume 1 trade sales are okay. Volume 2 are half of that.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, listen, it's a hard market.
I think, I mean, that is definitely the conversation we have. And that's one of the reasons why, like, if I'm being super honest, like, we're still, doing the pros and cons columns to sort of figure out like which is the best way to go.
Obviously, yeah, like 2021 with such and it's like we're finally having a unified discussion about Asian Americans in this country, the type of violence and horrible things that are happening that have been happening.
Yeah,
it's very important that we have positive books like this that really it's important to have this type of media out there right now. And I think it's a great time, like, with Minari coming out and all the success it's had. And it's such it's really warming my heart, but it's like Black Lives Matter when, like, oh, finally we're all kind of getting on the same side here, but it's for a very horrible reason.
Yeah, it's it's been surreal to kind of work on this book with all of this happening sort of in the background. Like, when we announced the book, it was the same week where we announced the book. I think I want to say the 3rd week of February, and sort of at the top of February is Lunar New Year. And so what happened in Lunar New Year was a lot of elderly. Well, I should start by saying, through 2020, there were more anti-Asian hate crimes. There was an increasing number of anti-Asian hate crimes against Asians, but specifically elderly Asians. And what happened in February was on top of, those attacks happening for people trying to get elderly Asians Lunar New Year money. And so it was this point where it just hit, like, it just skyrocketed. And and yet the national media still wasn't covering it. And I think the week the book came out was like the very first story, and that was a real. It's not like the news came out of nowhere, but it was a real surreal thing for me to like, oh, the book is getting announced right when all of this is kind of like converging, and it was a really hard thing for me to figure out like how to talk about the book, because the two things aren't unrelated by any stretch of the imagination. Like, my book is part of like where the history and where the context of where this stuff comes from, but it isn't talking about the events that are happening right now, that the actions we need to be taking right now to do something to help. And so I was very sort of conflicted about like, how do I talk about this book in a way that doesn't feel like it's pulling focus on like the things that really need to happen right now, but at the same time I can't not talk about this either, because that's part of the problem. And so it has been sort of a really surreal kind of experience to have this sort of happening in the background. And I don't know, and I think on the one hand, I'm really, there's legislation that's been passed, there's hashtags, there's a lot of national attention for it. But I think going back to sort of what I was sort of saying earlier, I think for any marginalized community, for any community of color, there's always the fear that this is a moment and not a movement. And that, this was the fad to pay attention and to care about this stuff.
Right.
And hopefully that isn't the case.
Right. I mean, when I started writing La Voz de Mayo, it was during Trump's beginning of his campaign in 2015, 2016, where, Mexicans were being compared to rapists, criminals, scum. So it was like very invigorating for me to be like, you know what, I'm doing something that really counteracts that. Like, it's important that we had Mexicans for every war, and we had Native Americans also fighting for this country when this country was stolen from them. And like I said, these topics are evergreen. We're always going to be talking about these, whether we like it or not. Same thing what's going on in Israel and Palestine. Like, that's a horrible situation that precedes us and that will go on for the rest of our lives. And how do we have this conversation? I think comics is a good way to have this conversation with literally everybody.
Yeah, I mean, like, having these conversations are always sort of tricky for me because they involve sort of a lot of authority. And so the only thing I've ever felt comfortable sort of doing is talking about whether the world outside my window, whether that is sort of my community or sort of, the people that I'm from, the culture and the heritage that I'm from, with the hopes that, at the very least, we can provide a perspective, a series of facts, an acknowledgement of these things that do exist, and then hopefully, have the existence and the acknowledgement of those things be part of a conversation moving forward.
I think that's the best place to leave this conversation. I've taken an hour of your time, probably the longest you and I have ever interacted, which we don't have to do this for another year. This can't
be true. We hung out at bars for longer than this.
I'm just kidding. Let's remind people when number 2 comes out. FOC's on Monday.
FOC's on Monday. Issue 2 comes out June 7th.
June 7th.
I really hope I got the dates right on that.
Well, take your time to.
Hold on. Let me look at the calendar. The trick is June 7th actually a Wednesday? Oh, maybe it's June 9th. June 9th is a Wednesday.
Is it June 9th?
So
okay.
Yeah, so that's what it comes out.
Okay, cool. I 9 issues. That's really exciting, man. Congratulations to you and the team. Loved issue 1. I have issues 1, 2, and 3 in a Dropbox. Shout out to Will Dennis.
Will's awesome. But also, the congrats on Helm Greycastle, man.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously, thank you. It's your podcast, so I can't barrage you with questions and compliments.
You can if you want to. I mean, the reason why I do this is because, people aren't asking me to be on their shows. There's Tonight Show for comics. You know what I mean? There's no place for us to have a physical conversation.
Well, okay, so all right, if I'm gonna keep it because if you're showing your time and all that kind of stuff, but I am really curious, I mean, I guess it's a long question, but how did that, you've got a game in your book, you and Brian have worked on it together. How long did you guys have had this idea and bring on the team? I know that's a really long
Oh
question.
no, I mean, if you have time to talk, sure. I mean, we'll talk about it. Let's see. So Helm Greycastle was a book that, all right, so I started playing D&D 2 years ago, and with someone you probably know, Amadeo Totoro.
Oh
yeah. So like Amadeo and her partner Cheyenne got me into D&D, and we like, and while I was playing, I was like, there's really no like Mexican or brown aspect to this. And then I like looked at my whole life and was like, oh, I love Willow, no Mexicans. I love Lord of the Rings, no Mexicans. There was no one that looked like me in these things, and I never asked why.
Right.
And then I started to ask why. Why aren't they in? Why wasn't there a Chewie with Aragon, or like a Humberto? Like, where were they? So when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, maybe they were just south, like really far south from Mordor. So like the elevator pitch for Helm Greycastle is, what if Mordor had a south side? What if there was a north that they went to, but they never went so far down? And while I was doing research for La Voz de Mayo, Gonzo would say, we are the blood of the indigenous and the conqueror. And that whole Mexico was like transformed into this Spanish colony. And I always got crap for never learning Spanish. And if you could see, my name is second hardest to pronounce next to yours in this industry. No one ever knows how to say Barajas. It's Barajas. It's a lot of like different ways to say my name. I was like, oh, so like I started to research Mesoamerican history and was like, oh, there was kings and queens and gods and jaguar knights, and Montezuma the second sent warlocks to the shore to stop Cortez and the Spanish army coming in. And what is the like worst time to find out magic isn't real? When a blonde, like a white man in a beard with a steel knife cutting you in the stomach and taking your land. Like that seems like a fantasy to me. And I was like, well, how do I mix this? And what if the Aztecs got to have a second chance and they beat the Spanish? And it started to get really interesting to me. And Brian Valenza emailed me early 2019, like January 2019. He was like, hey, I have a team of people. I want to do an anthology. Do you have any ideas? Like, do you have any scripts? And I was like, of course. Like, I have a bunch of ideas. And I sent him Helm Greycastle, this other Mexican superhero. We're also doing a horror story. And I like showed it to my people, like my coworkers at Top Cow, and they were like, this is really cool. What are you doing with this? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I want to see if this is worth pursuing. And I wanted to make sure, like, I don't know about your situation, which you don't have to get into. I wanted to make sure that if we did a Kickstarter, I raised enough money to advance everyone money to do issue 1, and no one had to wait on any back end, because I personally cannot pay, money, like fork out the money that it requires to do a whole book. So I did a Kickstarter. I had gold dice made. I wanted to write it. I wanted to have an RPG element. So my friends Amanda Meadows at Oni Press and Jeff Golden, they said I should talk to Tristan Tarwater, who was an author on Rolled and Told, and Tristan just like knocked it out of the park. Like it was also serendipitous, where I'm glad we waited a little longer so we could, while we were in the pandemic, to do this book, because Tristan was going back to school and they were learning Spanish history, Mesoamerican history. So it was very serendipitous that they were like way more knowledgeable about all this than I was. And I wanted to make a game where you had to be brown, because whenever you play a game, you're not an Asian guy, you're not a Mexican guy. Like it's very rare that you get to start off. Like it would be only logical that your character in Mexico, in this little tribe, is going to have to like go and do this amazing thing. So that was like something I wanted to also challenge, because I don't think D&D is doing enough to bring in people of color into this space, because I never played D&D growing up. I don't know about you.
I played in high school, but
Right.
that was sort of a blip in my life, and then comics took over everything else.
Right.
But
Yeah.
now
So go
that
ahead.
process for you, is that like, because again, like I know one thing, which that's comics and the media, so I don't know anything about games. Like, did you have a sense of like what the game was going into it, and then you gave it over to Tristan, or did you just give him the world and he kind of told you what like what's that process like?
So the process for the game was, my idea was, I want people who read this book to get more familiar with the world they're in.
Yeah.
So this is the game takes place before the Spanish arrive. So the indigenous people, the account that I've read is that they were warned 10 years before that the Spanish were coming, through these like weird like weather changes. A bird with a mirror on its head came and like showed them something. So like that's where we are. We wanted to operate, was educate people about the bad omens that they got. And that was the goal that I had, was like, how can we educate these people and then also have something interesting for them that really honors like role-playing games, fantasy. And Tristan was like, is a really amazing storyteller, and has written so many books and RPGs that they just they just knew like what to do. And when they showed me what they wanted to do, I was like, yes, this is cool, let's do it. So in issue 2 we have Jeffrey Golden, who did a more more of a traditional story, where it's like takes place with Helm Greycastle. You get to play as the character, because I wanted that aspect too, where you get to live with the character a little bit longer after the comic, and have that. I think like that's why I love comics so much, is that these characters get to live, and they get to like last forever. When you read a novel, that character dies or is very happy at the end, and I'm like, I've spent 300, 400 pages with someone, and that's it.
You're right,
Like, they don't.
right.
When's issue 2 coming out? Like, I want this to. That's one of the things that really tears me when I read books, which I love, the visceral reaction it gives me. So that's why I wanted to honor with issue 2. Like, how do we give the character, like that person, a little bit extra time with Helm? And then in issue 3 we have Tristan coming back, and they're telling a story that continues from 1 to 3, which wasn't really like, I wanted to give them more time, because writing a game, testing a game takes a lot of time. So like I think like there's a lot of fantasy comics out there like Die, and they have the role-playing game aspect into the story, but you don't get to play it. So I wanted to do, I also, like, from a marketing standpoint, I wanted to target game stores. I wanted to target comic shops with game stores. Smart. Like, if you go to, did you go to North Hollywood?
Oh yeah, the North Hollywood.
Yeah, so like there's a whole corner dedicated to D&D.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted them to be like there, like I want that book there.
That's so interesting. That's so smart. That's so smart.
Thank you.
That's so cool. I like that a lot. That's awesome, man. Well, listen, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Great book.
I appreciate it.
You should be happy. You should be proud of it. I hope you are. I
am. And like you, I'm sure it's really hard to acknowledge the time you're in. It's really hard to like be present, and really hard to enjoy it. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just alone in this.
I will enjoy it once it's. I mean, the problem with serialized comics is you're just like, when is it gonna fall off the cliff? But like, you know, like it doesn't. You just launch the book and you're just kind of like, okay, issue 1 was okay, but how much will it fall for issue 2? And then you're like, issue 7 was okay, but what's gonna happen with issue 8? Like, you know, so like, there's a little bit of like, you're trying to enjoy it, but you're like, don't jinx it.
I mean, yeah, like for me, it was a 60% drop off. You know,
which is good for a comic, you know, like which like, you know, like it's crazy. Like that's the world we live in. We're like 60%. I hear 60%. Like, oh, good for you. Yeah. Congratulations.
Just half of well, you know, I mean, it's like there are only so many shops how could there be 100,000 copies out there of something?
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what I
because
mean?
the other truth of the matter is too is we also live in a time where people will buy the first issue. It's like, this is great, I'll get the trade. You know,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that 60% isn't necessarily 60% who weren't into it. There's 60% who could be very into it. They've just decided to make the decision to buy it, to consume it in a different fashion.
Exactly. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, Pornsak, you probably need to eat dinner.
I do need to eat dinner.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It was so good to see you.
Awesome to see you, man.
We'll hang out. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated, so if you want to hang out soon, I don't know about you, but
I'm fully vaccinated. I'm being slow with the hangout because I live with my mother now because I moved her into my place.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah,
during the quarantine.
Smart.
So
Yeah.
as a result, I'm slow. Actually, tomorrow will be my first time seeing another person outside of my family who is fully
Wow.
vaccinated. So it's
great.
a slow rollout. It's a slow rollout for me, but I'm getting there. So soon we will be able to like hang
Looking
out.
forward to it. Good to see you.
Sounds good, man. Good to see you, man. Bye.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thank you for this was the longest show I've ever done. I'm really happy that we did it. By The Good Asian, by Helm Greycastle. The next person I want to have on the show is Hector Rodriguez III, because he's doing a Kickstarter. Peso Heroes on Kickstarter. So that's probably the next person. Who knows? Well, it could be tomorrow. It could be later tonight. That's how spontaneous this show is. So we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching.